Well, we're going to jump into it just because I want to be respectful of your guys' time, and we may have some people jump on along the way. So Jennifer, kind of the way we do this is really an open forum in a lot of ways, and you're welcome to add your opinions and ask questions and whatever you feel like you need to do to have a better understanding about what we talk about. So yeah, so feel free to add your 2 cents on this. And I try to make this kind of a crowdsourcing type of a thing where people have the opportunity to really share a lot of best practices, and some of those things really come out, and some good ideas really are shared in most of these. In fact, Greg is probably one of the best ones as far as being able to share a lot of good information, so I'm glad he's on tonight. If you feel like you don't want to have your video on, you can mute your video and you can mute your audio as well. And I'll leave mine both on. Hey, Greg, there you are.
I hate being on video, so I always turn mine off.
But you're so handsome. Look at you. All right, so what I'll do is I'll get things started. You guys can do whatever you want as far as muting goes, and if you want to keep it on, you can. If you have little kids or something like that running around, I have a dog that's usually running around, so we're all at home here, and we want to make sure that we make this as productive as we possibly can. So I'm going to get this set up and get started, and then I'm going to share my screen with you. So give me 2 seconds here. And let me switch displays.
It's okay, Mom.
All right.
Speaking of kids running around.
Yeah, it's awesome. How good was it? All right, so we're going to leave that up there like that. That will work. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you, and we'll get started. Let's see. Okay, you guys can see my my screen now? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yep.
Oops. All right, I can't see you guys now, but that's all right. We're going to get started. So I've kind of done a lot of research on this, and I've been working with some other franchise networks that are in the home industry, in-home industry as well. And we've really tried to compile some information that would be very helpful for you. And so what I wanted to do today is share some of that information, and also talk to you a little bit about how I think it's important for us to kind of look at our business maybe a little bit differently than we have before in the past, because we're going to look at it in a couple different sections. And I want you, as we're going through these different sections, try to analyze where you think you are with your business, regardless of where you think it is. Don't be embarrassed if you don't think it's as far along as it should be, or whatever. Just be honest and analyze it as we talk about these things, and see if it helps to see where you are and where you can be going, and some of the things that we talk about as far as some of the steps that we can take to do that. Because nobody wants to attend a webinar and waste an hour of their time when we just talk about, hey, this is the best way to grow a business, and you just talk about kind of like fantasy things. What we want to do today is we really want to talk about identify really the best path for growth, and where you are on that path, and how do we get you to move 1, 2, 3, whatever steps forward, so that you're moving forward. You don't feel like you're stagnant, and you don't feel like you're going backwards. Sometimes we feel like we're going backwards a lot in our businesses, and that's not always the funnest thing to have happen for you. So we're going to jump right into this. In fact, I just need to pull this up really quick, so I want to be able to see. So one of the things that we did in this group that I had is we came up with what we've called the commonalities between successful franchise small business owners. And I thought these were really kind of insightful, because they kind of are a good gauge for you as to where you think you are in this process. So these are from a few hundred business owners that we surveyed and asked questions, and we talked to them about, you know, what made them successful and why do we consider them successful. And what I consider successful is not just a business that's doing revenue, but a business that's making money. And, you know, you don't have to be making a lot of revenue to be making some money, but the more the better. And so these are some of the commonalities that we found with these people. So I thought it was pretty interesting. The first one was, and you guys have always heard me say this, is that they never treat their business like a job. And that is so easy to fall into that, where you become the technician, you become the salesman, whatever it is, and that just really becomes your defining role within the business. Where in reality, if it's a business, it has to be treated a little bit differently than just a job. It has to have a broader vision of where the business is going, and a better handle on decisions that are being made within the business. And so I thought this was a really good one, and it was validation for me, because I've always talked about how you should never treat your business like a job. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. The first one is understand your strengths and weaknesses. I thought this was important because most of the people that we talked to understood that they were really good at a couple things, but they were not good at everything that needed to be done within the business. And so they really identified what they were good at, and they focused in on those things more than they did on their weaknesses. And their weaknesses, they had a plan to make sure that those things, you know, within the business got done. If they weren't good at something, they made sure that there was some way that they still got done, but they really focused more in on what they were good at, and their productivity went way up, and their ability to make better decisions went way up because of that as well. The third one is they found partners. A lot of times as a business owner, you kind of feel like you're the only one there, and that there's not really a whole lot of people for you to call on or rely on to really either help make decisions or bounce ideas off of, even come in and help out with part of the business. And so for them, one of the saving graces and one of the things that really reduced a lot of stress and anxiety within businesses, that they had people that they could rely on and help to run the business. And I know as a business owner in the past, that's one of the harder things to do, is to reach out to people and to kind of put yourself out there for that kind of help. So it's tough to do, but one of the things that I'm going to recommend is that you guys start thinking about this part of it as well, because I think this is one of them that we as business owners greatly overlook and not concede to. The final commonality that we found was they never lost sight of their goals. So I know that as a business owner, and maybe you're in the same boat, you tell me if you feel like you've done this or not. But when I first started my business, I had all of these aspirations of things that I wanted to accomplish. Well, shortly, within 6 months to a year, I had settled for something completely lower than that, because, you know, either I was, you know, completely fooling myself, or I just wasn't able to make that thing work. So think about that for a little bit. Has what you started the business thinking it should be at this point in time in your life, are you there, or are you short of that, or ahead of that maybe? But that's one of those things that these people have, is that they never lost sight of that goal. They never lessened the goal. They always increased their performance or their whatever to help get that to where they were back on track to that goal. And I thought that was really insightful, that they had the ability to be able to move forward and hitting these goals instead of settling for something less. Any questions or any concerns about that so far? Any where you might agree with that or see that within your business as well?
Well, Dan, I would have to say that, you know, this was a new field for me.
Yeah.
You know, I've come from business, but I've never come from this type of business. And so that number 4, I mean, I think I've really strived hard to work on 1 through 3. Number 4 is tough because the goals that I had set were, you know, basically goals that I put up.
Really not based on any experience is what you're trying to say, I think, right?
Well, it's based on what I read and what I, you know, talked with people about. But like I think I'm 60% of where I should be in my area, and I've got 3 more areas to open.
Yeah.
And I was hoping by this time that I would have another area open and getting that running well. But
Okay.
I can't even get my first area to the
Yeah.
point that I think it's,
Jennifer, I think you're in the same boat a little bit on that too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that I thought was really insightful from this group of people was there was this initial goal that they had set when they first started. And then when they got their feet wet, they realized that reality has set in, and what's the real goal? Maybe when I first started, the real goal is maybe unattainable, but what's the real goal? What's something that I really can shoot for and stretch for that I don't have to settle for? And I think that that's something that as you're thinking about number 4, now that you've been open for a little while, now that you kind of know some of your limitations, what does the goal look like? And I don't want you to set it as a goal as a loser goal. I want you to set it as a goal that's really going to help you get to a place where maybe you don't think you can get to right at this time, because you need to stretch, you need to be able to push yourself, and you need to be able to find ways to get there. So I don't know, I think that these were pretty insightful, and there are things that we've talked about before in the past, but they're a very good reminder that yes, those people that are out there running businesses that are successful have this type of a mindset. And so every day that I'm getting up and I'm like you guys, I own a business. I've got to be able to look at myself, and I've got to be able to, focus on the things that I know I'm going to do right. I've got to be able to have people to help me get those businesses done. I've got to focus on my goals and the steps that I'm going to use to get to those different goals. So I like this. I hope you're writing it down, or looking at it again when it's produced again, because this is something that I think is a great mindset for a successful business.
And I'll say, like, David and I, we have actually talked about trying to find a partner to help us to kind of take some of the stress off, and to help us with some of our weaknesses, because we also came from more business backgrounds versus this
Ownership.
type of business and ownership. And I think being able to figure out how to move into that, finding a partner and trying to, I think, would be huge for us.
That's a great topic for us to focus in on when we're down there, to kind of really identify some of those areas where you feel you're short, and what we can do to kind of fill some of those gaps. So talk about that, okay?
Okay.
All right, let's move on to the next one. And I kind of want to show you this because I think this is really important. This is, I don't know if about you guys, but I'm a very visual learner. I like to see things. I like to kind of imagine them in my mind. And for me, that's kind of the best way to learn. So I hope that this visual that I'm going to do for you here is important to you. But this is really kind of the track of growth that most people, they don't think about. Maybe they do a little bit, but most of the time they just kind of hope that they get enough jobs done in a week where they can make some money, but they're not really looking at it strategically about how much money can I make, what can I do, and how do I do this. And so I kind of made this graph here. It's based on a break-even graph, but I want to kind of show you some things that are based on enhanced performance. So this graph has a lot of information based on enhanced franchise owners, so it's very applicable to you. So most people, this would be this line that I just highlighted here is your revenue line. And I understand that most people's revenue doesn't look like this. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. But what I'm really talking about here is the median of the line. Is it improving? Is it getting better? And are we on a trajectory to really kind of grow the business? And then we have our two costs. The yellow line here is your fixed and then your COGS, but the sum of them together is your total costs. So this is with, as you can see up around, this is with one crew. And this is with one crew that's performing pretty good. I think that, a crew of 2 people, if they have a fairly good productivity around $75 per man hour, they're going to produce about $24,000 in revenue on a fairly regular basis. So with that in mind, so we're just kind of talking about this part of the graph right here, where we have our revenue equals $24,000, and our fixed and our COGS combined. Do you guys know what this gap is right here between the blue and the red line here? What is that gap? Do you guys know?
Profit.
Yeah, that's your profitability. on average, people in Enhance who have one crew who do around $24,000 are walking away with about $1,300 in profitability. That to me is not a very good number. And so there's a couple things that can be done, obviously, right? You can reduce the number of expenses down and widen that gap a little bit. You can add more revenue and steepen this line a little bit so that it widens the gap. But for the most part, on average, we're looking at around $1,300 of profitability. Now, what I want you to do is just kind of in your own mind is think about where you are on this line. Are you back here before the break even and you're losing money, or are you ahead of the line and somewhere making some money? There are some franchises out there that make pretty good money on one crew. I've seen some of them make about 20% at the best, but for the most part, most of our franchises are operating in this small little gap of profitability. And to me, I don't think that's the reason why people got into business, is to work really, really hard and to make a little bit of money. So what I really wanted to talk about today is how do we grow the business and how do we help you with the business so that we can turn this profitability into more, so that you're feeling less stressed, less anxious about the business, and can we identify some steps and some things that we can do to help you to move forward. So you guys know me, and you know that this gap right here, this line of total expenses and this line of revenue represents a fairly good performance within the business. This is if the business is doing about an 8-to-1 in marketing, if they're doing about a 25% conversion rate, and if they have about $75 per man hour in productivity. So if you're worse than that, obviously you're going to be further down this line. If you're better than that, maybe you're making a little bit more money. Where I have talked to some of our franchise owners, and Greg, I think we had this discussion when I came down to see you guys. One of the things that was really identified to me that was a powerful moment was, okay, most of our franchise owners operate with one crew. And I think one crew is kind of a limiting factor. One of the things that I noticed that when I was in the restaurant business is when you work with locations, there's really no way to make a lot of money with one location in a restaurant. It has to be with 2, 3, 4 different locations, and that's when you can get your total expenses to be fairly level, and you can widen that gap between revenue and your expenses and make some extra money with this. And to me, that was kind of the aha moment for franchises, is crews really kind of are the location kind of thing for us. When I started crunching numbers and when I started looking at this, I was really surprised to find out that if I added a crew and I was able to do about $48,000, look at my profitability gap now. I'm now about 30% profitability just by adding an extra crew. Okay, that's easy to say. The performance behind it is the hard part, and that's kind of the direction that we're going to go with this. Is I just want you to see that this is really how a good business should be run, is by looking at this and increasing our profitability. And we know that in Enhance, the best way to improve profitability is to expand and to have multiple crews. So for you, Jennifer, down in Dallas, that's, you know, we need to take a look at that. And I know for you, Greg, that's you know, opening up Flagstaff and, you know, getting Las Vegas up and going and all those different areas. That's going to be that addition of more profitability. The problem is, how do we get to the point where we're performing well enough that it makes sense to add that second crew? That's the unknown formula that most people don't know. And that's kind of really what I want to focus in on today and have our discussion about, is how do we really move into this area where we can start making profitable, have a profitable business, and not just be skimping along every month, month after month. And how do we get to the point where we can, it's more automatic and more predictable rather than unpredictable within the business. So you can notice down at the bottom, I have a couple boxes here. And these are going to be the focus areas that I want to talk about for a few minutes. The first one in green, let me just move this so I can read it. It talks about production. If you're in this phase of one crew, which I think both of you are, in this green box right here, it has to be about production. It has to be about marketing and sales, and trying to produce the right amount of leads and having the right amount of sales to back up having enough business to do that. And then the second part of that is this proficiency part, which is having people that are productive enough to do the job in a timely manner so that you can stack enough jobs in there in a month, as well as having some expense management. And that's something that I don't talk about lightly. As you guys know, expense management is one of those things that just can't be, well, I think my expenses are pretty good. I'm very good at saving my money. I'm very good at not spending money. That doesn't fly. You know, when you start putting it on paper and you start looking at it, it could really paint a totally different picture for you. So what I want to do is I want to focus on this green section here first. We'll talk about this here in a little bit, but there's a couple things that I really want to talk about, and maybe open up a discussion line about some of the things that are in here. So let's talk first about what I call getting our house in order, and that's really taking control of the things that are your variables of your business. So your marketing spend and effectiveness, that's really a hard thing to get your hands around, and it's really hard to kind of get the right formula for it. In a real easy world, if you want to do 24,000 and you want an 8-to-1 return, you got to spend $3,000 to get there. What I write here is that there has to be some sort of, if you want to get your revenue on the right trajectory, there has to be some sort of ability to go out there and diversify enough in marketing to get the type of leads that you need to have come in. And so when I say this, the marketing spend effectiveness, this is like a pretty deep conversation, and it's one, Greg, you and I, we've talked about it a little bit. Jennifer, we haven't talked about it a whole lot, but this is one of those things that's individual to each person and each demographic. So it doesn't really do me a whole lot of good to say, here, you need to go spend your money here, you need to go spend your money here and do this and this and that. What we need to do is we need to really kind of find what is the right mix. And then that mix may change month to month. It may change quarter to quarter. But the idea is making sure that the money that you're putting into it is actually producing some of the leads, you know, in slow times and in busy times as well. So this, Jennifer, I think is something that would be a good conversation for us to talk about. And Greg, we really need to readdress this and talk about it. I know we talked a week ago, but we really, you know, based on some of the numbers that I'm looking at on your marketing, I think that there's some things that we really need to do to tweak it for 2020. I'm not sure if you're going to get as much traction as you want this time of the year. I know you guys did pretty good last year, but I still kind of feel like November and December are going to be a little bit lighter just based on some of the things that I've seen as far as the trends down in that area. So, but we'll talk about that, okay? And some things that we can do maybe to look at that. Okay, sales conversion. This is a big one. I've noticed that as I've gone out, so one of the things that I do, Jennifer, like I'm going down to Texas, but one of the other things that I do is I do a lot of site visits. So I'll go out to some of my clients' areas and I'll work with them. I'll actually go on sales calls and I'll do all kinds of different things with them. And one of the things that I'm really noticing is that sales conversion is one of the things that is truly suffering in the network. Owners do the very best that they possibly can to sell it, but sometimes their very best isn't quite enough. It doesn't fill the bucket enough to really be as effective as it could be. So a lot of times what happens is we start going through leads, they end up not turning into jobs, and it's more of a lead quality or not enough leads problem rather than let's look at the sales tactic behind it and see if that's producing enough of our jobs. So that's why I always say there's got to be a metric behind it, and it's got to be better than 25%, at least 1 in 4. You're doing better than that, aren't you, Greg, down in St. George?
It changes every month. It's been really, really high at like 60%, and then we've had it down to 10%. So I haven't looked at the averages.
What do you think is the difference between the up and down ebb and flow of this?
You know, I don't know. I'm trying to analyze, where those leads come from, and then what's the conversion rate of each of the leads, like HomeAdvisor, Yelp, Google. And I'm finding in most cases that my HomeAdvisor leads tend to convert at a higher rate than my Google leads. But I just have not had a chance to sit down and evaluate all the data.
Actually just crunch the numbers and find out for sure. Yeah, and that's interesting to know. Maybe there's some validity behind that, and those kind of trends actually should help dictate some of the marketing decisions that you spend your money on.
Absolutely.
If your HomeAdvisor is doing better than Google, we should back off the Google ad spend a little bit and put that into HomeAdvisor. And so we should always be monitoring that and making sure that that's something that's paying off for you and doing better for you. And Jennifer, the same thing. I'm not sure how, I don't know your business very well right now, but if you're not producing enough leads or enough jobs, there's something to do with these two things that we're talking about here. It's either a marketing problem or it's a sales problem. And what I was trying to get at before was, it seems about 80, maybe 70% of the time when I go out and do these visits, that the leads that they do get are fairly good. For some reason, they don't always equate into the job. And I attribute that just to lack of sales experience or a lack of sales experience within that area. And so we put them on a sales training program and we try to help them. And we see, for instance, I'm not sure where Tim is. Tim is, but he's gone from 15% and he's almost at 50% now, and he's been going through a sales training to get those. So it's really been helping him out a lot. So we got to talk about those two things. Those are important. The next one that I have on here is I think equally important, and that's productivity. You've got to have people that are good at what they do. And there's a whole book that could be written on just number 3 here, because it's so important to have people that you can trust, people that are going to work hard for you and do well for you, that this becomes one of those things that is a very limiting factor to your business. And it becomes the biggest limiting factor because you start selling and you get better at your sales, or your marketing starts to get better, and then you just don't have the capacity to do more work because you just don't have the people who can do it for you. So this has to be something that's in the back of your mind and something that you're constantly working on. And so one of the things that I would recommend with this, and be very specific about it, is this has to be something that's measurable for your people. They need to know on a weekly basis what their productivity is and what their goal is. If they're not seeing that and they're not being able to work towards something, they're just never going to get better. We had a guy down in Sacramento that we hired for somebody, and super great tech. She was awesome. She's a hard worker, just like bubbly and bouncing all over the place. Really loved, and she even had a name. Her name was Mandolin. I mean, it fit her personality perfectly. Where she's about 3 months into the job and she's almost ready to quit. And I thought to myself, what has happened? Why are you getting ready to quit? And she's like, I just don't feel like I'm challenged. I just don't feel like I'm getting better at what I'm doing. And I just don't feel like I'm really part of the business. And so I met with the owner and I'm like, dude, you're going to lose these people, and they're not going to be good people if they don't feel like they're part of something, part of the business, and if they don't have goals and different things to work towards. And so this was kind of a powerful moment for him, and he's working on it. It hasn't got there quite yet, but this can be one of those things that can really hurt your business if you're not really focusing on that. Is there anything that you guys have done that has helped you with that, or do you see some of the problems that I'm pointing out here as well?
Our tech, well, we only have one tech, and he's very loyal in regards, like he's very dependable and works. He kind of goes up and down on productivity. Sometimes he's really great and really bad. Excuse me.
Really bad.
Yes. We have the peanut gallery over here. A 5-year-old peanut gallery, no less. But then in other times, excuse me, mommy is on a call. Please go. And then other times we see it's like wow, why is this taking him so long to get this done? You know, like we have goals and we try and set, okay, for this job, we want to get to this place each day, you know, have a goal for each day and where we need to get. And I have found when I'm out there working with him, which I'm usually out there working with him, but when I'm right there next to him, productivity goes way high. But then if I'm not out there right there, like working with him, and I don't tell him what to do, I just kind of, you know, we work side by side, then it's like productivity goes way down if I'm not out there.
So he doesn't obviously feel a sense of ownership in what he does. He's just more doing it because you're there, number one, and you know, trying to do the best that he can when you're there, because it's, you know, you're gonna hold him accountable if he doesn't.
And we try and encourage him to take ownership of it. We've tried to like set goals for him and stuff, and it's just, we really don't see a sense of like him wanting to do more, wanting to learn more. Like we said, you know, we want you to go and learn something. Like if you want 2 hours a week of just going, and we've given him like different jobs about like, go learn and find out about different species of wood and how they take on stain and stuff, or do this, you know, we give him kind of assignments per se, like go to Home Depot and find out what, you know, what these different species of woods are, or what's this or what's that, and what's going to be best. And he just doesn't really complete those.
Yeah.
So
Greg, what do you think?
tough.
This is one of the hard parts of the business, and that is, you know, finding qualified people who are willing to work hard to make us money and either stay or not. So because they don't have any skin in the game. So I have 3 employees, and I understand what she's saying, in that when I work with them, they tend to move much faster. When I don't work with them, the results go down by a fairly significant percentage. Now I have one manager that you've met, Dan, and he does a great job all the time. And, you know, I'm continually trying to figure out how to motivate him to be even better. But he's also learning. So we're in an industry where what we do is we are artists, right? We're not painters, because you can paint a kitchen for 1/3 the price that we charge easily. And I have a lot of people that go that direction. And so we have to offer a quality product. We have to offer a factory-like refinish on our kitchens, or people will stop coming to us. But we need people that can learn to do that work. And I have 2 guys right now I'm trying to teach, and trying to get Chris to teach, to be very detail-oriented and really offer a good product. And neither one of them, although they've both been with me for almost one since August of last year, one since March of this year, I couldn't send either one of them on a job by themselves and expect good quality results. And that's the hardest part, because I'm paying them pretty well. And so that margin there is very, very difficult, because I can't afford to pay anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Or I lose money.
Sure.
And when you talk about the crews, I have enough for 2 crews in this city. And last month, our best month of the year, we did a lot of money. But I've had 2 crews for 4 months. And because I have a guy that can come or go, it doesn't matter to him how much he works, which is awesome. And then I myself, I can go out and work. So we have a second crew that we can instantly put into production. But
so do you feel like that's your limiting factor, is your ability to allow these people to work independently?
Well, I mean, no, that's not the limiting factor. The limiting factor is getting the business, right? The conversion. If we had the jobs, I would make it work. I don't mind working 15 hours a day. And
Sure.
I've done it in the past, and I can do it in the future to get to that point. But we just don't have the work. This last month, we were solidly booked for 4 straight weeks. And the 4 guys did $35,000, right? It was our best month in the whole year for a whole year. But all of a sudden it's dipped down to, I have no jobs next week.
Yeah.
Right. So it just, and I went through 5 weeks of not getting a single job, although I probably had 15 to 18 leads that came in. So the single limiting factor right now is getting the jobs on the books. I can get the jobs done.
Yeah.
It's getting them on the books. And I had a $9,000 job last week bail on me. I went over to get my deposit for a Monday start. I went over on Friday and they said, no, we've decided to go a different direction.
That's always fun. That's always the hard part about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think every one of these, we're gonna bring up the last one here in just a second here. In fact, I'll bring it up right now. These 4, I think, are either one or a combination of them are what I feel are the limiting factors of your business. So like you're saying, it's not necessarily one thing. It's probably, if I had more jobs coming in, I could get the business done. But at the same time, you don't want to work 15 hours a day, every day of your life and be the technician either. You want to be able to work on getting your business to grow independent of that. So, I mean, I look at these as those limiting factors and how do we overcome those? And a lot of these things, and the reason why I think they become limiting factors is because there's no one way to say to everybody, here's how you overcome number 1, here's how you overcome number 2. All of these are highly individual things. They require, your marketing and the effectiveness that goes on there, your lead generation is highly dependent on the area that you're within. Your sales conversion is highly dependent on you, whoever is doing your sales for you, how well they sell, how are they layering in new ways of doing things, are they getting better and things like that. The productivity is highly dependent on your employees and how well they are. And your expense management is really dependent on your business and how it's set up and what type of business it is and the type of expenditures you have for your business. So all these things are very, very highly personal. And one of the reasons why I listed these is because I feel like each one of these has to have some sort of personal plan behind each one of them. Something that you can do to work on each one of these to make them better. So how do we, like, for instance, let's take sales conversion. What are, if I add up the numbers and I look at them, are my sales conversions telling me that I'm doing the right job, or is it telling me that I'm not? And if I'm not, what's the plan? What's the things that I've got to do to get myself into place that's going to improve it? Now, one of the things that we haven't really talked about before is there's got to be a time frame to this. So a lot of you have opened up your business and you've gone through a year or maybe more than a year or less than a year, and maybe you're not where you expect to be. And some of that might be that, well, I don't have the right people, or I just don't have this. Well, what I think is implied with these 4 things here is, if my marketing's not where it needs to be, what do I need to do? And how much time am I going to give myself before I get to that marketing point? Or sales conversion, if I'm at, say, 15%, I got to get to 25%. How much time am I going to give myself to get to that point? And there's got to be a deadline to some of these things. It can't just be, I got to get better at it, and so I'm going to work on a couple of things. There's got to be some time frame and some commitments around doing that. Otherwise, I just think it gets pushed out. And so as we work, and Greg, as you and I talk in the future, I think that's one of the things that we need to layer into our conversation is, what are some of the specific things? Let's talk about marketing. Let's go through each one of the different things. Maybe we need to back off on some of the ad spend and put it into something else. Maybe we need to do this, this, and this. And we try to work that out so that it becomes a little bit better. On sales conversion, maybe the true number is that you're at 25%, but you need to be at 30 or 40%. What are some of the things that we can do in the next 30 days to improve that number so that we can, with the leads that you have coming in now, add another job or two to the mix? So those are all things that I think are really important to us. as we move forward. And I would challenge everyone challenge you guys right now to take a look at these 4 as limiting factors within your business, and what are some of the things personally and within your area that you can do to really try to make a difference within those. And what I'll do is I'll probably have a follow-up call with you guys, and we can discuss some of those different things that we're talking about here. But those things to me are really important. Now I've highlighted them, some of them in black and some of them in green. And the reason why is because the 2 top ones, marketing and sales conversion, really drive your revenue. And the bottom 2 really drive your profitability of your business. So it's important to have a mix of both of these to try to really focus on these 4 things, because in order for you to have revenue with profit, you've got to have all 4 of these working for you. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So let's go through a quick scenario here. Let's say, you're noticing that business is down. There's a decrease in results. And so, as business owners, what's the first thing that we do is we start thinking about, okay, well, where do we think that decrease is coming from? What is it? And so what we do is we start looking for some options for change, and we create some steps, and then we take action, right? We try to take care of it, and we try to look at this decrease as a temporary thing and try to improve things so that we can get things back in order. What happens, generally speaking, in business and small business life is that sometimes that order that we do things in doesn't always work out, and we don't get the result that we're looking for at the very end of this. In fact, it's sometimes we're focusing on something that's completely wrong and something that we don't really need to focus on. So let's give like an example here. So leads seem to be, or I'm not booking enough jobs. Let's say that that's the problem. I just am not booking the same amount of jobs as I normally do. I'm taking into consideration that maybe it's a slow month or whatever, but it just seems that things are not booking the right way that they should. Well, based on these steps that I have outlined here, most people, about probably 8 out of 10 franchise owners, usually revert to this scenario or to this reason. It must be that I'm not getting enough leads. And it could be, but generally speaking, they revert to that because that's a little bit more out of their control. They don't feel like they have the ability to go out there and produce the type of leads that they think that they're supposed to get. And so they think that they need more and more of them. And that could be the case, we just don't know, but that's generally speaking what most people will default to. So what they'll do is they'll either spend more money on marketing, they'll put more money into it, or they'll find somebody else to do marketing for them. That results in making maybe a bad decision, like putting a magazine ad in, or maybe it's increasing your ad budget. And so they just kind of go through this change of throwing noodles at a wall and hoping that it sticks. And it doesn't really pay off real well. And a lot of times, sometimes you get lucky, but most of the time you don't. And it ends up being something where you take a loss on an expenditure. So the step that's missing here is, what do the numbers say? And so one of the things that I've always really kind of been a person that's yelled from the ceiling tops is, if you don't know your numbers, you can't make good decisions. And so one of the things that I would really recommend to you is, in these 4 categories that we've been talking about, if you have visibility of it, just even if it's a very high level of visibility, it's better than having no visibility of those numbers. And so if you have a decrease in business, we've got to first of all look at what the numbers are saying. And this is what is saying in the business is that there is a marketing ROI of a 9-to-1 and a conversion rate of 15%. So where is the real problem in this business?
The conversion.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the leads, right? It's maybe the fact that they have some leads, but they're not converting enough of them into jobs. So if we don't know those numbers, we may be making a decision based on the wrong information and going down the wrong path. And so if we know that, we can enlist in some sales training, we can practice. It's a 9-to-1, so the sweet spot really is 8-to-1. If you're getting about a 9-to-1, I'm probably going to increase my ad budget because I know I'm going to be able to get more leads out of it. So these numbers really tell us a story, and they really highlight the steps that we need to take to really increase our business. And if we don't know those numbers, then we've got to get our hands around those. Because this process that I'm highlighting here, if we see a decrease in our business, if we just kind of guess or hope that we're making the right decision, it's going to end up not making the right decision in the long run for you. You're going to lose more than you're going to make it. So how do you keep track of those numbers? How easy is it for you to keep track of your ROI? How hard is it for you to keep track of your sales conversion? They're really quite simple formulas, and they can be figured out on a sheet of paper every week if we needed to. And that's something that if you're not using OnTrack as much as you think, okay, I get that. I hate OnTrack too. I think it's a stupid program. But but I can at least write down on a piece of paper how much I spent on marketing and how many jobs I did and what the revenue were on those jobs. And I can figure out a rough draft of what my ROI is. And I can do it per marketing channel. So within 5 minutes, I can probably figure out most of these numbers, and I can have a fairly good idea. And if we're not taking time to know those numbers, then we're probably not making the right steps possible. And so I'm going to challenge you guys to really do that, to really try to look and tell you and see what your numbers are saying. So remember, Jennifer, I sent out an email a few days ago looking for some specific things from you when I visit. And
Yes.
The reason why is because I don't want to come down there and guess as to what can be happening within your business.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm going to do is I want to try to go based on historical data, what we can do in the future. So that's the reason why we want to do these kind of things. Okay. Let's keep moving along here because we're quickly running out of time. So anyway, if we're in this green quadrant here, there are some things that we can do to move forward. And I really want to impress in your minds if I possibly can. And I know this is sometimes hard, especially when you're in the trenches working hard every single day and sometimes getting no's all the time or $9,000 jobs, going with somebody else, and you start losing those things, that it's really hard sometimes to stay focused on these things. But really understanding that if we can take more control of this red line and this blue line, we will be able to grow our business properly. But it's only when we can identify what those numbers are telling us or what those lines are telling us. If they're all over the place and there's no consistency anywhere, then that may be the first place that we need to start working. But we've got to kind of have an idea and understand that this area right here is really not the area that we want to be. We've got to make some goals and some action plans that are going to get you beyond that so that there's some profitability within the business. And we're working and striving to increase that profitability. And there's got to be a deadline to that. And I think that's one of the things that we don't talk about enough. If I start a marketing plan and I give it 6 months to work, if I can't get something to work or take some traction within that time, I'm probably going to change it up. Because, I obviously think that things need to build with that. Same with training and sales and things. I've got to have a time where if by this time I've gone through some training and I've done everything I possibly can to be the best salesman I can, and I can't by this day get my conversion rate over that 25%, then we've got to start looking at some other things and some other scenarios around that. We've got to be able to have some of that consistency. Otherwise, the business is just all over the place, and it's just not where we want to be. And that's kind of a perfect world. I know that day to day, sometimes this doesn't always work out the way that it should, but on a high level, I think this is really kind of where we need to kind of be thinking and moving. Any thoughts or concerns or questions about that you might have? Man, I must have explained that really, really well.
Dan, my only thought is, do I have an area large enough and the demographic is at that level or whatever it may be, that I can sustain multiple crews?
Sure.
I have 2 areas that I definitely could sustain multiple crews in each area. But I have also 2 regions where I'm not sure they can sustain multiple crews. But it would really depend on, like you said, testing different markets and trying to figure out what makes sense in the area that I'm in to see if I could create 2 crews. Because, I understand the concept, right? My fixed expenses and cost, well, my fixed expenses in a single region are set, they're fixed, right? So the more crews I can bring online, the more money I'm going to make. The problem is I have 2 regions that might only sustain 1 crew.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I know St. George is limited because it's not a gigantic area. However, the one thing that I will say is I know for a fact that we're not at the limit of what it can produce right now. And so how do we get to at least that limit or close to it? And from that point, I think, if you're managing the expenses and you're maxing out the amount of revenue that you can get from that area, I think that can be a very profitable area for you. I don't think that you have to have tremendous amount of expenses in there. It may not be a 30% profitable area where Las Vegas could be 35%, but it can be a very good contributing member to all of the territories that you have. So how do we get to that point? And so that's kind of what I'm talking about here is knowing those 4 numbers the best that we can and having very specific things that you're managing on a day-to-day basis, because you just get lost in the weeds. You're lost in doing the job. You're lost in following up with your guys and making sure that they're, not missing stuff. You're lost, trying to get estimates and things like that. But the week has to start with some sort of knowledge of how the business is performing, specific in numbers. And if you know that, then throughout the week, you can do things that can maybe affect those things rather than affecting something that's not necessarily getting you the results that you want it to give you. So I'm going to be a proponent of it because I believe in it 100%. And as a business owner in the past, I know that if we can work towards with a deadline, certain specific numbers, and take those limiting factors and try to create less limit and open them up a little bit, I think that's where you're going to make the money and that's where you're going to see the growth. The one thing I do see, Greg, is if you can make it work in St. George, if you can get your crews very productive and you can have a fairly decent profit margin within that area, then you can go into Las Vegas and kill it because you've learned the basics and things that you need to know in an enhanced business of how to make it work. And all you have to do is then, as it says in this slide here, is you've got to replicate it. You've got to just do it again in a bigger area. And if you can replicate that type of performance with your people and with those 4 limiting factors, then that's something that's going to produce quite a bit for you. So I'm not sure if that makes a whole lot of sense to you, but I think that's one of those things that I think is really important. And maybe one of the things that you and I really need to sit down and do is just really figure out what those 4 limiting factors are, because I can go through the marketing numbers with you really easily because we've got those right at our fingertips. We can look at the sales numbers and we can figure that out, and we can put together a plan that's going to be more specific than just throwing noodles at a wall, possibly. So I think those are some things that maybe we can do. So let's talk about I want to get through this pretty quick because I don't want to keep you guys here all night long, and because we're pretty much done as it is. But one of the things that I want to do is we want to get beyond that green section of the graph, and we want to get into this production part. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because we're not there yet. We've got to get ourselves in a position where we're control of our expenses and we're in control of the revenue line, and it's moving in the direction that we want it to be. There may be some dips in it here and there, but for the most part, it's moving in the right direction. So this slide here is really kind of that second section, that blue section, and we'll take some time to go over that individually with you guys. But really what it is, it's all about you. It's all about you becoming less of the day-to-day taskmaster person and being the leader and having the vision for the business and really propelling it forward. So a lot of good things in this and a lot of things that we can help you out with that as well. So a couple of things, best practices. Develop some partners, some people that you can work with, some people that you can trust, that have a positive influence. Now this could be like a group of business owners that get together and that you could talk to. It could be an employee. It could be HubSuite. It could be anybody that you're talking to. That could be somebody as a partner that can help you through some of these limiting factors of your business. And so having these people to bounce ideas off of, to run action plans up against and things like that are really going to be very beneficial to your business. So I really want to stress this one for you. I want you to try to keep it as simple as you possibly can. Always, if you're focusing on things that don't need to be focused on, that just creates noise within the business. If you have an idea of what those 4 limiting factors are and what you have to be doing, that keeps it as simple as possible, and it keeps the noise and anxiety out of leading the business. You know what you have to do, you're working towards it, and you're trying to get things done. Have a plan. You know, I know the Coles are very good about writing their plans. I remember your training, and I think that that's really awesome, and that's something that you can't give up. It's, you know, you've got to have a plan. But I'm telling you right now, that plan has to have a deadline. It has to have a point in time where you say, I have to accomplish this by this date, because that puts pressure on. It makes it so that you do everything that you possibly can to get it. And it's the same with employees. They have to be productive by a certain time. Otherwise, we have to kind of evaluate things, and we have to kind of figure out different things. So have a plan with a deadline. Have a time factor with that. And never think that you're going to be good at something that you don't like to do or you don't like spending time in doing, because you just never will. So if you're doing things that you hate doing, you're gonna do it halfway, and it's going to turn out to be a horrible thing, and it's going to end up bogging your business down. So I'm going to encourage you to spend time doing things that you're really good at, use your strengths, and let's then start using things that you're not good at and incorporating some other tactics that we can do to really help you fill in some of those gaps. But I think that those are really important. And these are kind of some of those best practices that I think can really help you out quite a bit. So what I'd like you to do is you don't have to do this right now, but I want you to write down 3 things that have maybe come to your mind during this conversation that we've had about something that you could do differently. Whether it's, I just need to be better at keeping track of things, or I know my number and I need to get to this number, I got to write it down, and I got to create an action plan around that. If you don't do something different today, then you won't do something different tomorrow. So that's why I always ask you, if you just take a few minutes today and write down 3 things that you want to do differently, and then live by those 3 things and share them with me, and let's talk about them, and let's keep things going for you guys. So if you guys could do something like that, I think that that would really help you out. And what I would really like to do is follow up with both of you and have some individual conversations about your specific areas, and let's go through our limiting factors, and let's see where we need to be and what we can do to increase that. And you've got somebody, you've got me, who, regardless of what your relationship is with HubSuite, I'm here to help out, because I've been a business owner. I know what it feels like. I know what it's like every day to wake up and have the stress and anxiety of owning a business. And so I want to help you guys. I want to do the very best that I possibly can. That's what I always call the HubSuite family. Is we're here to share best practices and help each other out and do the best that we can for each other. So, and that's my commitment to you. Do either one of you have any questions or concerns at this point?
Of course, there's lots of concerns.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
But no, and actually I've been working on trying to get everything together, that email that you sent to us, to send you that information. So I know you'll be here tomorrow, but you should have something in your email by morning.
Okay, that'd be great. That'll be perfect. We'll take a look at it. And Greg, we got to get together. I think you and we need to have more conversations together on some things, and I really enjoy your input on stuff. It helps me out quite a bit when we talk about a lot of stuff, so I appreciate it. Okay, that's all I had for you guys today. I hope you guys have a great night tonight. I hope I've stirred some creative juices in your minds, and that you start thinking about things maybe just a little bit differently. And if you do, that's great, because that's going to mean something different as a result, rather than the same old happening over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Have a great night tonight, guys. If you need anything from me, please let me know. I'm more than happy to help you out with anything that you need, okay?
Sounds good, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay. You're welcome. Have a great night.
You too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.